Welcome back to the Primal Lab. So today we're going to be talking about a core practice that I learned through Tom Brown Jr. and Grandfather Stockton Wolf. And this is a practice that is I would say it's a little bit subtle, almost more of a discipline, and it's extremely powerful though, and it's something that may at first glance look like uninteresting, whatever, but this is something that will change your life. And I probably say that about all these core practices because it's true. You put them all together and it's amazing. It's another thing, this does blend into the other core practices. So we have, for example, the sit spot, we have sense meditation, we have the fox walk, and some other things. And so this is something that we weave in early on into the curriculum because it's a vital piece to nature connection and helps to shift some of the programming that you are unlearning or softening, and helps to kind of install new programming for nature connection and self-awareness. So the exercise today, the session is about what's called, or what Grandfather Stockton Wolf called, the sacred pause. And the sacred pause. So in that word, in that phrase, there's the word sacred. And whenever Tom shared something, or Grandfather Stockton Wolf shared something he called sacred, it obviously elevated it. It meant, hey, this is really, really, really important. You should maybe take a look at this and really keep this. So there's a few others that he talked about as well that come up. But so the sacred pause is a way of being that keeps you in contact with the patterns of nature, the cycles of nature, what we call earth time, which is a thing. There's this pace, and this is, for some of you, this might be a little hard to get. If you've ever been backpacking for a long time, or even traveling or on a vacation where you really got to relax or hang out by the beach a lot or something, or in some ways we're in contact with nature, and then you came back to your life, and you can feel the disparity, you feel the difference, right? It's like encountering this whole other gear, and you're like, oh man, that's right, I gotta do what by Monday, and I gotta have all the, the stress starts to come back up. So the difference that you feel, the difference that you encounter, and that's just an example. I mean, more specifically would be if you were camping, with, say, close to the earth, meaning you were living in maybe a debris hut, or finding your own food, or doing a quest or something like that, where you were in deep contact with the earth and with nature, the rest of nature, continuously for some period of time. Your wildness will emerge, and your conservation of energy will emerge, especially if you're hungry, by the way. And you find this other gear. There's the gear of survival, which is a notch down from what we ordinarily expect of ourselves. It's a space where you naturally do less and pause more and move at a pace that matches the rest of the environment. So all the other animals, even though you see like birds and stuff that seem, these little things that seem very twitchy and fast and darty and stuff, yeah, but there's a lot of downtime too. There's a lot of just chilling and watching, and part of it is the scale, the size of the animal. These very small animals, to their proportionally, they move a little faster. They don't have as big of limbs to move and stuff, right? But you watch things like deer, or even the predators. Think of National Geographic looking at the lions, looking at these animals, that other mammals that are Most animals actually, most of the time, they are in a baseline state of rest. It's a restful state, right? Rest and relax, rest and digest. The parasympathetic nervous system is dominant. So that state is free of stress, or at least negative stress, and is growth mode. Is where we want to be to heal and recover and to digest and to basically it's where life is, the active, super active kind of fight or flight mode of getting stuff done and knocking stuff out and crossing stuff off the list, and even at any level of intensity like that, like working out level, feels really productive, but it's actually the more destructive part of the cycle. So there's part of the cycle is action and part of it is recovery, right? And so in the wild, the bigger part of the story is recovery. I mean, you don't spend energy that you don't need to spend, and that's just back to the law of conservation of energy. So all this to say that the pause is something, especially in our modern life, it's a way of bringing our awareness back to the baseline of what's actually going around with us. So there's many levels to this pause thing. It can be just a simple mechanical pause, like when you walk out of, you see this woods behind me, if you're coming out of that woods, and all animals would, as they approach that kind of edge, that transition area, there's a natural point there where your body, if you pay attention, naturally kind of wants to hesitate or pause or reassess. So anytime you're entering a new landscape or new baseline and crossing a threshold of some kind, there's a natural pause. We do this when we walk in, when we go to someone's house. Maybe you haven't been there before, or even if you have, you pause on the porch, you knock on the door, they open the door. You don't just walk in and push them out of the way, and you certainly don't just walk up and bust through the door. That's an example of a cultural artifact of pausing. It's a natural pause that's built in. So, but these pauses are all over the place, and it's part of our etiquette still. However, in our normal life, especially our internal life, we can get carried away with just thinking, going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, without honoring transitions and without really digesting what we're on. So this has so many applications. It gets very deep very fast, so I'm trying to stay kind of just at a base, useful level, practical level. So the pausing helps you come back to helps your awareness kind of catch up with you in a sense, and it helps you find the gear that is more in tune with the laws of nature around you. Like I said, it's dropping down a gear. I suspect that this gear of conservation of energy and survival is why some of the reports of early explorers, they thought of native peoples often as being lazy and kind of useless, or they're just not busy, and I think they were plenty busy in a way. They had their own rhythms, they had their own timing, and who knows what they were really paying attention to or noticing. And if they had been living there for generations and many, many hundreds or thousands of years, they certainly had a way of blending with the environment that worked, because they wouldn't be there otherwise. Nature would just absorb anything that doesn't work. So this pause, actually, let me share this little story to give you another idea of what it's about. So Stalking Wolf, or Tom and Stalking Wolf were on a walk, and Stalking Wolf's this old elder, essentially wizard, that Tom's always learning from, and is always modeling. So Stalking Wolf's teaching him constantly, not just in his words, probably less in his words, but more in who he's being. And they're out for a walk, and so Tom when he was younger, would notice that once in a while when they were walking down a trail or something, stalking wolf would just stop, like he forgot something. Like when you're walking out the house and you're just like, you freeze, right? And Tom was like, what the heck, is he losing it, this old guy, And then he would watch him, and he would wait for a second, and then he would start moving again. And Tom thought it was just strange, and grandfather had a pace of moving, no doubt, that was different than ordinary modern movement, like the fox walk. But this kind of like strange, seemingly random stopping, kind of, Tom didn't know what was going on until he caught on, excuse me, that what grandfather was doing was catching himself not being present, basically. So if you can imagine moving in a way through the wilderness or through life that you are moving from your center, and your awareness is whole, it's expanded, it's connected to you and everything going on around you, and you're moving in such a way that that connection stays. Okay, so here's another way to say it. So have you ever been driving home from work or from school or whatever, and noticed that you got down the road a long ways without even remembering how you got there in terms of driving? So you're just kind of blacked out. You're probably because you've driven that route so much, you can do an autopilot unless something's wrong, and you're thinking about other stuff, or you're somewhere else in your mind, or maybe you're talking to someone, and there's a gap in your memory of how did I get here? I don't remember even driving this patch, right? So that happens to me all the time. That happens to us all the time. We're often in different worlds in our mind. For grandfather, this is a different thing. This was a rare occurrence. He would be where he was and be doing what he was doing. And so if he found himself outside of that, he would stop and even back up on a trail and be like, whoa, I didn't take in that part of the trail. And then he would pause until his awareness was connected, and then he would continue walking. He would also do it to allow his disruption on the landscape to diminish. Sometimes, as we're moving, the birds are flying away from us or whatever, and the animals are responding. And if that chain of events kind of gets outside of your awareness or ripples out too far, you really don't know how everything's responding, and you've left basically a bigger impact than your awareness. And so he would pause. If he sensed that his impact was getting outside of his awareness, he would slow that down until his sphere of awareness was greater than his sphere of disturbance. So that is an example of how this pause works, or where it came from. And its function is simple. It's simply survival. This is why animals pause and hesitate. It's not so much that they're running stories in their mind like we are, but it's they're entering a new baseline. They're like, whoa, assess this. What's going on here? This is different than what I was just in. It's when you come out of the woods and into a field area, it's like, okay, this is a different area. What are the sounds here? What's going on? What's everything look like? What's happening here before I just commit to walking in here, right? So anyway, the pause, another feature of it is that it allows you to create a distinction between what's happening and what stories you're telling about what's happening. We're always running. There's always a couple things going on. There's what's actually happening out there, and then there's what we're making it mean. And as humans, we often live in the storyland of what we're making it mean, and we're not necessarily connected to what is actually happening. In our section on the sacred question, another sacred thing, we talk about the function of the sacred question and how that starts to help you see the distinction between those two things. The challenge is, if you don't have a space at all, if you don't have a flag of a bookmark to know the difference, that there's even that you're even doing it, you know, you need something to wedge in there to open the space so you can look at, you know, what's happening and then notice what you're making it mean. So the pause is a way of inserting a space in your life, in your movement, in whatever you're doing, in your attitude, in your mindset, to make sure that you are connected to reality and not just living in storyland. So that's another function of it. So it's literally, you know, a tool that you can use to create a space, you know, in what's going on around you. Okay, so that's kind of the deep part of the pause. How this looks is very simple. The hardest part about it is remembering to do it. And so for that, you may need to establish a few what we would call anchors or triggers, things that are going to help you remember to pause. So, and when you pause, let's just talk about how the pause looks. So, you know, not to overcomplicate it, but it's pretty straightforward. Physically, if you can, the best way to practice this to start with is to physically stop moving. Slow down at least, or stop moving entirely. With that stop, you're going to just let yourself be pulled into the space around you. If you've listened already to the part about, or to the section on sense meditation, this is a good time to install your sense meditation or the sacred question. And just allow yourself to be absorbed by everything around you and also within you. So you could be absorbed by what's going on within you, but you could be absorbed in a way that you're not aware of it. And so this is a way of giving yourself space to notice how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what's happening around you, right? And to make all of those to heighten all of those, to elevate them. So, but by physically stopping, if you're able to, it really creates a powerful trigger to be able to go internally and just kind of assess. And later I'll be giving you some specific questions and tools to assess, or things to assess. But for now, you know, just notice what's going on around you, what's going on within you. And you will have a natural urge to keep going, actually. After you do that assessment, you'll be like, okay, that's long enough. It could be anywhere from seconds to minutes, depending on the situation, right? Now, it's not always convenient to pause. You can't just stop in the middle of you don't want to do this when you're driving and just just check out, right? But you could pull over. This is where, you know, we take breaks, you know. So it's like taking a break, but a little more frequently and a little shorter and a little deeper, just to check in. And it helps us connect with ourselves, the world around us, and to create a space for a new choice or a new direction if we need to. So to create triggers for this, a simple one is what I just described on the transition area. So if you're walking into a new space, before you just barge in there, you know, pausing, just, or at least acknowledging that you're walking into a new space. Just kind of notice, like, okay, it could be a new room with people. It might be a new environment. Maybe you come off of a trail up to a new point. It might be moving, you know, from one room to another, even, or from one task to another. So you see how this can be kind of generalized in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be on the physical landscape. The pause translates to all dimensions. And so you may want to pause between activities or between conversations. I mean, how many times have you heard, if you get angry, to pause, to just count to 10, right? Don't just be in reaction mode. There's no space. That's just the stimulus response. Back, you know, that gap's shut again. You need to open that gap to where you can make a new choice, and that is open. The wedge is the sacred pause. Okay. So think of some areas that you can, some ways that you can trigger yourself to remember to pause, and then practice the pause. You may want to end the pause with just a simple, what we refer to as surrender. We'll get into that later as well, which is just kind of a letting go of whatever is present and just letting go to nothing, and then pick up whatever you want after that. Okay. All right. So this pause becomes a vital practice in survival. This is how you're going to get your guidance, how you're going to find what you need around you, how you're going to answer questions, and so many other things. It's just a huge piece of the puzzle. So, but for now, enjoy your pausing, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and keep going.